Ethan Cole's hands shook as he stared at the $20,000 Nathaniel Crow laid on the table. Enough to save his dying ranch, pay every debt, rebuild everything his father had spent 30 years creating. All he had to do was walk away and let Crow take Clara. The woman he'd hired as a cook 6 weeks ago. The woman who'd transformed his ranch, his crew, his entire life. The woman currently standing in his cookhouse, waiting to see if he'd sell her out. $20,000, or one stubborn cook who made him believe in people again. His father had taught him to trust land, never people. But standing there, Ethan realized his father had been wrong about everything that mattered. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from so we can see how far this story travels. Now, let's get back to Ethan's impossible choice. The morning Clara Bennett stepped off the supply wagon in front of Silver Ridge Ranch, Ethan was shoeing a horse that didn't need shoeing. Anything to avoid the reality that he'd broken down and sent for a cook from town. "Mr. Cole?" He didn't look up. "Barn's that way. Cookhouse is the log building with a chimney. Don't expect much." "I wasn't planning to." Something in her voice made him glance over his shoulder. She wasn't what he'd expected. Most women who took cooking jobs on failing ranches were either desperate widows or girls running from something. Clara looked like neither. She stood there in a simple gray traveling dress, one worn leather suitcase in her hand, watching him with eyes that had seen things but refused to apologize for them. "I need to know if you can actually cook," Ethan said, dropping the horse's hoof and straightening. "Last woman who answered my advertisement couldn't boil water without burning it." "I can cook." That's what she said, too. Clara set down her suitcase. "Mr. Cole, I rode 2 days in a wagon that smelled like rotting potatoes to get here. I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I'm fairly certain you're just as desperate as I am, or you wouldn't have hired someone sight unseen. So why don't we skip the part where you test my patience, and I'll skip the part where I turn around and leave. Show me the kitchen." Ethan blinked. Nobody talked to him like that. Not anymore. Not since his father died, and the weight of this dying ranch had turned him into something hard and mean. "Kitchen's a strong word for what you're about to see," he said finally. She picked up her suitcase. "I've seen worse." She hadn't. The cookhouse was a disaster. Dried food crusted on every surface. The stove looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned in months. A family of mice had taken up residence in the flour barrel. The place smelled like old grease and failure. Clara walked through it slowly, her face unreadable. "The last cook was actually one of the ranch hands who drew the short straw," Ethan admitted. "We've been through 4 of them in 6 months." "I can see why." She set her suitcase down and rolled up her sleeves. "Do you have any cleaning supplies that aren't covered in dust?" "Probably not." "Then I'll need to make a list. I also need to know how many men I'm cooking for." "Right now, just me." The admission burned. "But I'm hoping to have a crew of 8 before the spring drive." Clara turned to look at him directly. "You're hoping to have a crew, or you're planning to have a crew? What's the difference?" "Hope is what you do when you've given up. Planning is what you do when you still believe you can win." Ethan felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. It might have been anger. It might have been hope. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. "I'll have a crew," he said quietly. "One way or another." "Good." Clara opened a cabinet, and a cascade of stale hardtack fell out. "Because I didn't come all this way to cook for one stubborn rancher. I came to feed cowboys." That night, Ethan ate the first real meal he'd had in months. He sat alone at the long table in the cookhouse. the table that used to seat 20 men, but now echoed with emptiness, and tried to figure out how Clara had turned rancid supplies and a filthy kitchen into beef stew that actually tasted like something worth living for. She worked quietly in the kitchen area, cleaning as she went, never once asking him if the food was acceptable, like she already knew it was. "You didn't learn to cook like this on a ranch," Ethan said finally. Clara didn't turn around. "No." "Where then?" "Does it matter?" "I like to know who I'm employing." "You're employing a cook, Mr. Cole. That's all you need to know." Ethan set down his spoon. "I had 3 men walk out last week because I couldn't feed them properly. Before that, I lost 2 to a ranch up north that paid less but treated them better. My father built this place from nothing, and I'm watching it die because I can't figure out how to make people want to stay. So yes, it matters. Because if you're going to disappear like everyone else, I'd rather know now." Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she finally turned around, her expression was softer but no less guarded. "I worked in a hotel in Chicago," she said carefully. "The kitchen served 300 people a night. I learned to cook under pressure." "Why'd you leave?" "Same reason you're still here. Sometimes staying is harder than leaving, and sometimes leaving is the only way to survive." She turned back to her work before he could ask what she meant. Ethan finished his meal in silence, but his mind wouldn't stop turning over her words. There was a story there, a big one, and every instinct his father had beaten into him screamed not to trust someone with secrets. But his father's ranch was dying, and this woman with secrets had just made the first meal in months that didn't taste like giving up. The next morning, Ethan found Clara in the garden plot behind the cookhouse, on her knees in the dirt, measuring out rows with a piece of string. "What are you doing?" "Planting a vegetable garden. You're paying me to cook. I can cook better with fresh ingredients." "It's March. Nothing's going to grow for weeks." "Which is why I'm planning now instead of hoping later." She glanced up at him with the slightest hint of a smile. "Learned that from someone recently." Despite himself, Ethan felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "You need supplies. Talk to me first. We're not exactly flush with cash." "I noticed. Your supply accounts are a mess." "How would you know that?" Clara sat back on her heels. "Because I was looking for basic cooking staples and found receipts showing you're paying twice what you should for half of what you need. Whoever's been handling your accounts is either incompetent or stealing from you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That would be me. I'm handling the accounts." "Oh." Clara had the grace to look embarrassed. "Then you're just incompetent, not a thief. That's actually better. Incompetence can be fixed." "I don't need fixing." "Mr. Cole, you hired me to fix your food problem. I'm telling you the food problem is connected to your money problem. You can't afford good supplies because you're being cheated by your suppliers. Let me handle it." "You're a cook, not a business manager." Clara stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt. "In Chicago, I managed kitchen supply orders for a 300-seat restaurant. I negotiated with vendors who'd been in business longer than we've been alive. I know how to spot a bad deal." She paused. "But if you'd rather keep overpaying for rotten potatoes, that's your choice." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her to stay in her lane, but the truth was, his pride had already cost him his crew, and it was about to cost him the ranch. "Fine," he said roughly. "You can look at the accounts, but don't change anything without asking me first." "Of course not. It's your ranch." She said it without sarcasm, but somehow it still felt like a challenge. 3 days later, Ethan rode into town with a list Clara had written in neat, precise handwriting. She'd reorganized his entire supply system, identified which vendors were cheating him, and found alternatives that would save him nearly 30% on basic goods. "How did you do this?" he'd asked her that morning, staring at the numbers. "I paid attention," Clara had replied simply. Most people don't. Now, standing in the general store with her list, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Like maybe he wasn't doing this alone anymore. Ethan Cole, the voice came from behind him. Heard you're hiring again. Ethan turned to find Jack Morrison, a cowboy he'd worked with years ago, before Jack moved on to a bigger spread up north. Might be, Ethan said carefully. Why? Because word's getting around that something's changed at Silver Ridge. Pete Jensen was in town last week. Said he stopped by for water, and your new cook gave him the best meal he'd had in months. Said the whole place felt different. Ethan's chest tightened. Pete was a drifter, someone he barely knew, yet Clara had fed him anyway. She's good at what she does, Ethan admitted. Good enough to bring in a full crew before the spring drive? That's the plan, Jack grinned. Then I'm in. Haven't had decent food in 2 years. When do I start? By the end of the week, Ethan had hired 4 men, not because of better pay, not because of easier work, but because word had spread that Silver Ridge Ranch had a cook who could actually cook, and a kitchen that felt like home. Clara never took credit for it. She just kept cooking. But Ethan noticed everything. He noticed how she learned each cowboy's name within a day, how she asked about their families, their aches and pains, their stories, how she kept coffee hot all night for the men on watch rotation, how she'd started teaching Tommy, the 15-year-old stable boy, to read using old newspapers and endless patience, how the entire atmosphere of the ranch had shifted from silent endurance to something almost like hope. And he noticed how she never talked about herself, never mentioned Chicago except in passing, never explained why a woman with her skills was working on a failing ranch in the middle of Montana. One evening, he found her in the cookhouse after supper, going over the supply accounts by lamplight. You don't have to do this, Ethan said. You've done enough. Clara didn't look up. I'm almost finished. That's not what I meant. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. You've been here 2 weeks, and you've changed everything. The crew's coming back together. The ranch feels alive again. I'm just trying to figure out why you care so much. She set down her pencil and finally met his eyes. You asked me once why I left Chicago. I left because I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up, and people got hurt because of it. I won't make that mistake again. What does that have to do with cooking for cowboys? Nothing. Everything. Clara's voice was soft but steady. Sometimes you can't fix the past, but you can choose what kind of person you're going to be in the present. I chose to be someone who shows up and does the work, no matter how small it seems. Ethan felt something crack open inside him. Something that had been sealed shut since his father's death. My father used to say, trust the land, never trust people, he said quietly. He got burned too many times by partners who stole from him, workers who left when things got hard, friends who disappeared when he needed help. By the time he died, he didn't trust anyone except me. And you believed him. I had no reason not to. Everyone did leave. Everyone did disappoint me. Until... He stopped himself. Until what? Until you showed up and proved him wrong. Clara looked away, but not before he saw something flicker across her face. Fear, maybe. Or regret. Mr. Cole, you should be careful about putting too much faith in me. Why? Because I'm not staying forever. Nobody does. You could. The words were out before Ethan could stop them. Clara's head snapped up, her eyes wide. I mean, Ethan fumbled for recovery. The ranch is growing again. I'll need permanent staff. You're good at this. You could stay on. If you wanted. Clara stood up abruptly, gathering her papers. I should finish these accounts. Good night, Mr. Cole." She was gone before he could say anything else. Ethan sat alone in the empty cookhouse, cursing himself for speaking too soon, revealing too much. But the truth was out now, hanging in the air like smoke. He didn't just need Clara to keep the ranch running. He needed her here for reasons that had nothing to do with cooking. The next morning, Clara was back to business as usual, acting like their conversation had never happened. Ethan matched her professionalism, but the tension between them had shifted into something neither of them wanted to name. The crew noticed. "Boss is moon-eyed over the cook," Ethan heard one of the cowboys mutter to another. "Can you blame him? She's the only person I've ever seen who can out-stubborn Ethan Cole. My money says she turns him down flat. My money says he never asks." Ethan wanted to tell them they were all wrong, but he wasn't sure they were. 2 weeks later, a rider came to the ranch carrying a telegram. Ethan was repairing fence line when Jack came galloping up, looking worried. "Boss, you need to see this." The telegram was addressed to Clara Bennett, care of Silver Ridge Ranch, Montana Territory. Ethan stared at it. How did anyone know she was here? "I don't know, but whoever sent it paid premium rate for delivery. Must be important." Ethan's gut twisted. This was it. The past catching up. The thing Clara had been running from. He found her in the cookhouse, preparing lunch. "This came for you." Clara froze the moment she saw the telegram in his hand. The color drained from her face. "Who knows you're here?" Ethan asked quietly. "No one. I was careful." "Then how did they find you?" "I don't know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know." She took the telegram with shaking hands and opened it. Ethan watched her read it once, twice, 3 times. Then she crumpled it in her fist and closed her eyes. "Clara, what's going on?" "I have to leave." "What?" "No, I have to leave, Mr. Cole. Today. Now." She moved past him toward her room, already pulling off her apron. Ethan followed her. "Tell me what's happening. Maybe I can help." Clara spun around, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw real fear in her eyes. "You can't help with this. No one can. I should never have stayed this long. I was selfish and stupid, and now—" Her voice broke. "Now what?" She pressed her hands to her face. "There's a man in Chicago, a powerful man. I used to work for him. I saw things I wasn't supposed to see. Terrible things. Human trafficking, corruption, people disappearing. I was going to testify against him, but he has judges and police in his pocket. My lawyer told me to run before they could silence me. So I did. And now he's found you." Clara nodded miserably. "The telegram says he's coming. He knows where I am. He's bringing men." She looked up at Ethan with desperate eyes. "He'll kill me if I stay. But he might kill you too if I leave. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Ethan's mind raced. Every rational thought screamed that this was exactly what his father had warned him about. Trusting the wrong person. Getting dragged into someone else's disaster. But when he looked at Clara, this woman who'd brought his dying ranch back to life, who'd shown him that people could be good and true and worth believing in, he realized his father had been wrong about one thing. Some people were worth fighting for. "How long until he gets here?" Clara blinked. "What?" "How long until this man arrives?" "The telegram says 3 days. But Mr. Cole, you're not... You can't..." 3 days, Ethan calculated quickly. That's enough time to prepare. "Jack!" he shouted out the door. "Get the crew together. Emergency meeting in the barn. Now!" "Ethan, no!" Clara grabbed his arm. "You don't understand. Nathaniel Crow isn't just dangerous. He's powerful. He has money, connections, Trained killers! You're risking everything for someone you barely know. I know enough, Ethan said firmly. I know you're honest. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you could have kept running, but you stayed here and helped save this ranch. That's all I need to know. But your father's rule, never trust people. My father died alone and bitter because he couldn't tell the difference between people who'd hurt him and people who'd help him. I'm not making that mistake. Ethan's voice gentled. Clara, you're the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years. Maybe the best thing that's happened to me in years. I'm not letting anyone take that away without a fight. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. You stubborn, foolish man. Runs in the family. 20 minutes later, the entire crew stood in the barn listening to Ethan explain the situation. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't minimize the danger, laid out exactly what they were facing. I understand if you want to leave, Ethan said when he finished. This isn't your fight. You signed on to work cattle, not face down hired killers. No one will think less of you if you ride out today. The men exchanged glances. Then Jack spoke up. Boss, Clara fed us when we were hungry, helped us when we were hurt, treated us like family instead of hired hands. Far as I'm concerned, that makes this our fight, too. Damn right, another cowboy agreed. Nobody comes on this ranch and threatens our cook. One by one, every man echoed the same sentiment. Clara stood in the doorway, watching in disbelief as cowboys who'd barely known her a month pledged to risk their lives to protect her. Why? She whispered to Ethan. Why would they do this? Because you showed them what a family feels like, Ethan said quietly. And families protect their own. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Ethan and his crew fortified the ranch like they were preparing for war. They set up defensive positions, stockpiled ammunition, organized watch rotations. Clara insisted on helping, despite Ethan's protests. I won't hide while people fight my battles, she said firmly. On the third night, as the sun set over Montana's rugged plains, a column of riders appeared on the horizon. Nathaniel Crow had come to Silver Ridge Ranch, and Ethan Cole was ready. Nathaniel Crow didn't look like a monster. That was the first thing Ethan noticed as the man dismounted in front of the main house. He looked like money, tailored suit despite the dust, polished boots, silver watch chain gleaming in the fading light. The kind of man who'd never mucked a stall or mended a fence in his life, but somehow owned half of Chicago anyway. The 6 men with him looked exactly like what they were. Hired guns, cold eyes, hands hovering near their weapons. Ethan stepped off the porch, rifle cradled loosely in his arms. Jack and 2 other cowboys flanked him, armed but not aiming. Not yet. Mr. Cole, I presume? Crow's voice was smooth, cultured. Nathaniel Crow, I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't recall taking anything of yours. No? Then perhaps the woman currently hiding in your cookhouse would like to clarify the situation. Crow smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Miss Bennett and I have unfinished business. Miss Bennett is my employee. Whatever business you think you have with her, it doesn't concern this ranch. Crow pulled out a cigar, taking his time lighting it. The casual gesture was deliberate, showing he didn't consider Ethan a threat. I'm a reasonable man, Mr. Cole. I understand you were simply deceived by a convincing liar. Clara has a talent for that. So I'm prepared to be generous. He reached into his jacket. $20,000. More than enough to save your struggling ranch and hire 10 cooks better than her. The number hit Ethan like a physical blow. $20,000 would pay off every debt. Buy new cattle. Repair every building. Hire a full crew for 5 years. That's a lot of money, Ethan said carefully. It is. All you have to do is walk away. Go inside, pour yourself a drink, and let me handle my business with Miss Bennett. By morning, she'll be back in Chicago where she belongs, and you'll be a wealthy man. Behind Ethan, he heard Jack shift nervously. $20,000 was more than any of them would earn in a lifetime. What happens to her in Chicago? Ethan asked. Crow's smile widened. That's not your concern. I'm making it my concern. Mr. Cole, I don't think you understand the situation. I'm offering you a fortune for a woman you've known a few weeks. A woman who lied to you about who she is and what she's running from. Surely, even a stubborn rancher can see the smart choice here. Ethan glanced back at the cookhouse. He could see Clara's silhouette in the window, watching, waiting to see if he'd sell her out. His father's voice echoed in his head. Never trust people. They'll always disappoint you. But then he remembered Clara standing in that filthy kitchen, rolling up her sleeves. Clara teaching Tommy to read. Clara reorganizing his accounts and saving him money he didn't know he was losing. Clara looking him in the eye and saying, "Hope is what you do when you've given up. Planning is what you do when you still believe you can win." No, Ethan said. Crow's expression hardened. Excuse me? I said no. Clara stays here. You and your men leave. Now. Don't be a fool, Cole. 20,000. I don't care if it's $1 million. She's not for sale. Ethan raised his rifle slightly. You've got 30 seconds to get off my land. For a long moment, Crow just stared at him. Then he laughed, a cold, brittle sound. You have no idea who you're dealing with, do you? I own judges, police chiefs, half the politicians in Illinois. I could have warrants issued for Clara's arrest by tomorrow morning, and you'd be harboring a fugitive. Then do it. We'll see how far your warrants reach in Montana territory. Or I could simply take what's mine by force. Crow gestured to his men. 6 trained professionals against a handful of cowboys playing soldier. How do you think that ends? Badly for all of us, Ethan admitted. But you'll lose men, expensive men, and you might lose yourself. Worth it for one woman who knows your secrets? Crow's jaw tightened. For the first time, genuine anger flashed across his face. You're making a very serious mistake. Won't be my first. Probably won't be my last. I'll give you 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we're coming in. Anyone who gets in my way will regret it. Crow remounted his horse. Think carefully, Mr. Cole. Is she really worth dying for? Ethan waited until Crow and his men had ridden back down the road before lowering his rifle. His hands were shaking. Boss? Jack's voice was tight. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. Still figuring that out myself. Clara emerged from the cookhouse, moving like someone in a dream. When she reached Ethan, she just looked at him, really looked at him, like she was seeing him for the first time. You turned down $20,000, she said quietly. Wasn't mine to take. Most men would have taken it anyway. I'm not most men. No. Clara's voice broke slightly. You're really not. The crew gathered around them, and Ethan laid out the reality. We've got 1 hour before they come back. Maybe less if Crow's feeling impatient. Here's what we know. They've got 6 guns, probably more experience than us in a straight fight. But we've got defensive positions, knowledge of our own land, and something they don't have. What's that? Tommy asked. A reason to fight that's bigger than money. Ethan looked each man in the eye. Last chance. Anyone wants to leave, do it now. I mean that. No judgment. Nobody moved. All right then. Jack, Take 3 men and cover the barn approach. Tommy, you're with me on the main house. The rest of you spread out according to the positions we planned. And remember, we're not trying to kill anyone if we can help it. We're trying to make this cost them more than it's worth." As the men dispersed, Clara caught Ethan's arm. "I need to tell you everything. The whole truth. You deserve that." They sat on the porch steps as the sun disappeared and Clara finally told her story. She'd been the head chef at Crow's luxury hotel in Chicago. For 2 years, she'd thought she was simply running an exceptional kitchen. Then one night, working late on inventory, she'd stumbled into a storage room she wasn't supposed to enter. Inside were young women, girls really, locked in cages, waiting to be transported to brothels across the country. "I was so stupid," Clara said, her voice hollow. "All those late-night deliveries I wasn't allowed to see. All the locked rooms. The men who came and went without ever staying in the hotel. I should have known." "You couldn't have known," Ethan said. "I should have asked questions. Instead, I just cooked and collected my salary and told myself it wasn't my business." She wrapped her arms around herself. "When I saw those girls, I went to the police, told them everything. They pretended to listen, took my statement, promised to investigate. 2 days later, one of Crow's men came to my apartment and told me I had 24 hours to leave Chicago, or I'd disappear, just like the girls I'd tried to help." "So you ran?" "I ran. My lawyer, one of the few honest men I knew, helped me get out of the city, gave me money, a new name, told me to go somewhere Crow wouldn't think to look. I've been moving every few months, never staying anywhere long enough to matter to anyone." She looked at Ethan with tears in her eyes. "Until here. Until I made the mistake of caring about this place. About these people. About—" She stopped herself. "About what?" Clara stood up abruptly. "I should check the ammunition supplies. Make sure everyone has enough." "Clara, please don't, Ethan. Don't make this harder than it already is." She disappeared into the barn before he could respond. The hour passed too quickly. As darkness settled over the ranch, Ethan positioned himself on the main house porch with Tommy and another cowboy named Pete. From here, he could see most of the ranch yard. "You really think we can hold them off?" Tommy asked nervously. The kid was only 15, trying hard to look brave. "I think we're about to find out." The attack came sooner than expected. Crow must have decided that waiting was giving them too much time to prepare. Ethan heard horses first, then saw shapes moving in the darkness, more than 6 this time. Crow had brought reinforcements. "They're trying to surround us," Pete said. Ethan fired a warning shot into the air. "This is private property. Turn around or the next shot won't be a warning." Someone laughed in the darkness. Then gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Bullets splintered wood. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Ethan fired, reloaded, fired again, not aiming to kill, but to keep the attackers back, to make them think twice about rushing the buildings. From the barn, he heard Jack and the others returning fire. The defensive positions were holding, but barely. Then Tommy cried out and fell backward, clutching his shoulder. Blood spread across his shirt. "I'm okay," the kid gasped. "Just grazed me. I'm okay." But he wasn't okay. He was 15 years old and bleeding, and this was Ethan's fault for letting it get this far. "Fall back!" Ethan shouted to his men. "Everyone into the main house, now!" The crew retreated in stages, covering each other, dragging the wounded. They barricaded themselves inside as bullets hammered the walls. Clara immediately went to work on Tommy's shoulder, tearing strips from her skirt to make bandages. "It's not deep," she told him gently. "You're going to be fine." "I thought I was tough," Tommy said through gritted teeth. "Thought I could handle anything." Being tough isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and staying anyway. Clara finished bandaging him and looked at Ethan. We can't hold out forever. I know. Jack appeared at the window. Boss, they're regrouping. Looks like they're planning something. What they were planning became clear moments later, when flames appeared on the barn roof. Crow's men had set it on fire. No! Ethan moved toward the door, but Clara stopped him. It's what they want. You go out there, they'll gun you down. But the horses are already running. Listen. She was right. Someone, probably Jack, had opened the corral gates. The horses were scattering into the night, away from the flames. Smart thinking, but it meant losing half the ranch's assets. The fire spread quickly, lighting up the night sky. In the orange glow, Ethan saw Crow standing well back from the fighting, watching his hired men do the work. The coward wouldn't even risk his own skin. We need to negotiate, one of the cowboys said, before the whole ranch burns down. There's nothing to negotiate, Clara said quietly. He wants me. That's all he's ever wanted. Ethan turned to her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that I've been running for 2 years, and everywhere I go, people get hurt because of me. I'm thinking maybe it's time to stop running. No. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. Absolutely not. We're not handing you over. Ethan, look around. Tommy's bleeding. Your barn is on fire. Your ranch is being destroyed. All because I was selfish enough to stay when I should have kept moving. You stayed because I asked you to. Because this place needed you. Because He stopped himself, aware of everyone listening. Clara's eyes searched his face. Because you what? Before Ethan could answer, the front door exploded inward. 2 of Crow's men had broken through the back entrance simultaneously. Fighting erupted inside the house, close, brutal, desperate. Ethan grappled with a man twice his size, felt knuckles connect with his jaw, tasted blood. Then Clara was there, swinging a cast-iron skillet with deadly accuracy. The man went down hard. That's for threatening my cowboys, she said, breathing hard. In the chaos, nobody noticed one of Crow's men grabbing Tommy and pressing a gun to the kid's head. Everyone stop, or the boy dies. The room froze. Nathaniel Crow walked through the shattered door, stepping over debris like he owned the place. That's better. Now we can talk like civilized people. Let him go, Ethan said. He's just a kid. Then maybe you should have thought about that before dragging children into adult problems. Crow's gaze fixed on Clara. It's time to end this farce, my dear. You're coming back to Chicago with me. If you cooperate, I'll tell my men to stop the attack. The ranch will survive. Young Thomas here will keep his brains inside his skull, and Mr. Cole will live to regret his poor judgment. If you don't cooperate, he gestured to the burning barn. Well, you can see how that story ends. Clara looked at Tommy, terrified and bleeding, but trying so hard to be brave. Then at Jack and Pete and the other cowboys who'd risked everything for her. Finally, at Ethan. And something in her expression made his chest ache. If I go with you, she said slowly, you'll leave the ranch alone? Leave all these people alone? You have my word. Your word means nothing. I need better than that. Crow considered this. Fine. I'll put it in writing. A legal document stating that I have no claim against Silver Ridge Ranch or its occupants, provided you return to Chicago willingly to face the charges against you. What charges? Ethan demanded. She didn't do anything wrong. She reported your crimes. Ah, but that's not how the official record reads. According to the Chicago police, Miss Bennett is wanted for theft, fraud, and destruction of property. I have warrants for her arrest, signed by a judge. Crow smiled. Of course, Those charges would disappear if she'd simply agree to keep her mouth shut about certain business arrangements she misunderstood. "I didn't misunderstand anything," Clara said. "I saw girls in cages." "Your word against mine. And I have friends in very high places." Crow pulled out a folded document. "Here's my offer. Sign this agreement promising never to speak about what you claim to have seen. Return to Chicago. Disappear quietly. In exchange, the charges disappear and everyone here stays safe." "And if I don't sign?" "Then the warrant stands. You're a fugitive, and Mr. Cole here becomes guilty of harboring a criminal. They'll take his ranch, his freedom, everything." Crow's expression hardened. "One way or another, you're coming with me. The only question is how many people suffer before you accept that reality." Clara's shoulder sagged. "Let me say goodbye." "Clara, no," Ethan started. "It's over, Ethan." She looked at him with so much sadness it hurt to see. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I brought this to your door." She moved toward Crow, and Ethan felt something inside him break. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. But what choice did they have? Crow had the law on his side, had money and power and men with guns. Fighting him was like fighting a flood or a prairie fire, forces too big to stop. Clara reached Crow's side. He grabbed her arm possessively. "Excellent choice, my dear. Now, Mr. Cole, if you and your men would be so kind as to drop your weapons." The explosion came from outside, a massive boom that shook the house and lit up the night brighter than the burning barn. Everyone rushed to the windows. 3 wagons were on fire, the wagons Crow's reinforcements had arrived in. And standing near them, holding a torch and a rifle, was a woman Ethan had never seen before. "Who the hell is that?" Crow demanded. Clara gasped. "Elizabeth." "Who?" "My lawyer's wife. She must have followed Crow here." Clara's face transformed with sudden hope. "Elizabeth is a journalist. If she's here, that means—" More riders appeared on the horizon. But these weren't Crow's men. They wore badges. Federal marshals. Crow's face went white. "That's impossible. I own the Chicago police. I have judges." "In Chicago," the woman called Elizabeth shouted. "You forget about federal investigators. And you definitely forget about me documenting every corrupt official you bribed." She held up a leather satchel. 5 months of investigation. Names, dates, bank records, everything. The lead marshal dismounted, surveying the chaos. "Nathaniel Crow, you're under arrest for human trafficking, bribery, and about 15 other charges that'll keep you locked up for the rest of your life." Crow's men dropped their weapons immediately, smart enough to know when they'd lost. But Crow himself still had Clara in his grip. "I'll kill her," he said desperately. "I swear I'll—" Ethan didn't think. He just moved, crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, and hit Crow with every ounce of strength and rage he had. The man went down hard, releasing Clara. "That's for burning my barn," Ethan said. The marshals hauled Crow to his feet, clamping irons on his wrists. He was still sputtering threats and protests as they dragged him away. Clara stood frozen, like she couldn't quite believe it was over. Elizabeth ran to her, and the 2 women embraced. "How?" Clara whispered. "How did you find me?" "I've been tracking Crow for months. When he suddenly left Chicago, I knew he'd found you. I contacted the federal marshals, convinced them to let me help with the investigation. We've been 2 days behind him the whole way." Elizabeth pulled back, smiling. "It's over, Clara. Really over. The girls have been freed. Crow's whole operation is being dismantled. You're free." Free. The words seemed to echo through the ruined ranch. Clara looked around at the burning barn, the shattered house, the wounded cowboys, and started laughing. Then crying, then both at once. Ethan wanted to go to her, but suddenly felt like he had no right. She was free now, free to go anywhere, be anyone. She didn't need a failing rancher or a dying ranch anymore. But then Clara turned to him, and the look in her eyes made him forget how to breathe. "You fought for me," she said, "even when it cost you everything." "Haven't lost everything yet. Still got the house, most of the horses, the land." He tried to smile. "And apparently one hell of a story to tell." "Ethan, it's fine, Clara. I understand. You're free now. You can go back to Chicago, get a real job, live a real life. You don't have to hide anymore." Clara closed the distance between them. "What if I don't want to go back?" His heart stuttered. "What?" "Chicago was never home. It was just a place I worked. But here—" She gestured to the damaged ranch, the exhausted cowboys, the smoldering barn. "Here I found something I'd never had before. People who fought for me, who believed in me, who—" Her voice dropped. "Who made me want to stay." "Clara, you should think about this. Really think. The ranch is barely surviving. I can't offer you luxury or security or— I don't want luxury. I want to wake up and know that what I do matters. I want to cook for people who appreciate it. I want to watch Tommy learn to read and help Jack reorganize the supply accounts and argue with you about your terrible record keeping." She took his hands. "I want to rebuild this place and make it something your father would be proud of. If you'll let me." Ethan looked down at their joined hands, at this woman who'd survived hell and still chose kindness, who'd faced down her demons and won, who could have anyone or anything, but was standing here in the ruins of his ranch, asking to stay. "I'm not good with words," he said roughly. "I'm stubborn and proud, and I'll probably make you angry more often than not. I can handle stubborn. I've had practice. And this place is going to be hard work to rebuild. Years of hard work." "I'm not afraid of hard work." "Clara," he stopped, searching for the right words. "I don't just want you to stay as my cook. I need—" He took a shaky breath. "Stay because you want to. Because this place means something to you. Because maybe I mean something to you." Clara smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "You stubborn, foolish, wonderful man. You already mean everything." Then she kissed him, right there in front of the federal marshals and the cowboys and God and everyone. And Ethan finally understood what his father had gotten wrong all those years. Trust wasn't about never getting hurt. It was about finding someone worth the risk. When they finally broke apart, Jack was grinning like a fool, and the other cowboys were trying very hard to look anywhere else. The federal marshals seemed amused. "Well," Elizabeth said, breaking the awkward silence, "I guess I don't need to ask if you're planning to return to Chicago, Clara." Clara's face flushed, but she didn't let go of Ethan's hand. "I think Montana suits me better." "I can see that." Elizabeth glanced at the smoldering barn, the damaged house.
"Though it looks like you'll have your work cut out for you rebuilding this place."
"We've handled worse," Ethan said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. The marshals finished securing Crow's men and prepared to transport them back to face federal charges. The lead marshal, a grizzled man named Carson, approached Ethan with a grim expression. "Mr. Cole, I need to inform you that there will be an investigation into tonight's events. Federal property was damaged, shots were fired, and we'll need statements from everyone involved." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Are we being charged with something?" "That depends on what the investigation reveals. Self-defense is one thing. Vigilante justice is another." Carson's eyes swept over the destruction. "I suggest you get yourself a good lawyer and prepare detailed accounts of exactly what happened here." After the marshals left with their prisoners, the crew stood in the ranch yard surveying the damage. The barn was a total loss, just smoldering rubble and twisted metal. The main house had bullet holes in every wall, shattered windows, A destroyed door. 3 horses were missing, probably scattered during the chaos. And Tommy sat on the porch steps, pale and hurting, with Clara's makeshift bandage already soaked through with blood. "We need to get him to a doctor," Clara said urgently. "Nearest doctor's in town, 15 miles away," Jack replied. "And we lost most of the horses." "Then we ride double. Pete, you're the strongest. You take Tommy. Ethan and I will follow." Clara was already moving, organizing, taking charge. "The rest of you start damage control. Put out any remaining fires. Secure the animals. Inventory what we've lost." Nobody questioned her. They just moved. An hour later, Ethan and Clara rode into town with Tommy slumped against Pete's back, barely conscious from blood loss. The doctor, a stern woman named Dr. Judith Martinez, took one look at the kid and started barking orders. "Gunshot wound? What the hell happened out there?" "Long story," Ethan said. "Well, you can tell it while I work. Get him on the table. Clara, I need hot water and clean cloth. You," she pointed at Pete, "hold him still." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Martinez extracted the bullet, cleaned the wound, and stitched Tommy back together, while lecturing them about frontier violence and stupidity. Clara assisted like she'd done it 100 times before, calm and steady, even when Tommy screamed. "He's lucky," Dr. Martinez said finally, wiping blood from her hands. "Another inch to the left, and he'd have lost the arm. Another inch to the right, and he'd be dead." Tommy had passed out from the pain, which was probably a mercy. Ethan looked at the kid's pale face and felt guilt crush his chest. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "Don't start with that," Clara said sharply. "Tommy made his own choice. They all did."
He's 15 years old. He shouldn't have been anywhere near that fight.
And yet he chose to stay, chose to fight. That means something, Ethan. Dr. Martinez glanced between them. "You two want to have this argument somewhere that's not my surgery room? The boy needs rest, and I need to clean up." Outside, the sun was rising over the town. Ethan realized with a start that an entire night had passed. They'd been fighting, bleeding, surviving, and now they had to figure out how to keep living. "We should get back to the ranch," he said. "Not yet." Clara grabbed his arm. "First you're going to eat something, drink some water, and let me look at your injuries." "I'm fine." "Ethan Cole, you have a split lip, a black eye, and you're limping. You're not fine. Now sit down before I make you." He sat. Clara examined him with gentle efficiency, cleaning his cuts and checking his ribs for breaks. Her hands were steady, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of everything catching up to her. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting, for being here." Clara's hands stilled on his face. "Where else would I be?" "Chicago. Anywhere. You're free now, Clara. You could start over somewhere safe, somewhere that doesn't involve burned barns and gunfights." "I could," she agreed. "But I won't. This is where I choose to be." Before Ethan could respond, someone cleared their throat behind them. They turned to find an older man in an expensive suit watching them with open curiosity. "Ethan Cole? I'm Howard Blackwell. I own the bank here in town." His smile was professional, but predatory. "I heard about your troubles last night. Terrible business. Just terrible." Ethan stood slowly. Blackwell wasn't here out of concern. Bankers never were. "What can I do for you, Mr. Blackwell?" "Actually, I'm here to discuss what I can do for you, or rather, what I can't do." Blackwell pulled out a folder. "You have a loan payment due next week. $500. Given the damage to your ranch, I'm concerned about your ability to pay." The number hit like a punch. Ethan had been so focused on surviving the attack that he'd forgotten about the loan. $500 he didn't have, especially not now. "I'll make the payment," Ethan said, with more confidence than he felt. "Will you?" "Because I've done some calculations, Mr. Cole. Your barn is destroyed. That's at least $1,000 to rebuild. Your house needs extensive repairs. You've lost livestock. And I understand federal marshals are investigating the incident, which means potential legal fees." Blackwell's smile never wavered. "I'm a businessman. I have to protect my investments. So I'm calling in your loan. Full payment, due in 30 days, or the bank forecloses on Silver Ridge Ranch." Clara stepped forward. "You can't do that."
The attack wasn't his fault. Business isn't about fault, my dear. It's about risk and return. Right now, Silver Ridge is too risky. Blackwell tipped his hat. 30 days, Mr. Cole. I suggest you start looking for a buyer." He walked away before Ethan could find words. "How much do you owe?" Clara asked quietly. $3,000. Ethan's voice was hollow. "I took out the loan 2 years ago to keep the ranch running after my father died. I've been barely making the monthly payments. But $3,000 all at once?" He laughed bitterly. "I'd need a miracle. Or a plan." "Clara, there's no plan that makes $3,000 appear in 30 days. Maybe not. But there might be a plan that buys us more time." Clara's mind was clearly racing. Elizabeth mentioned that Crow's assets are being seized by the federal government. What if there's a reward for information leading to his arrest? You helped capture him. That has to count for something. Even if there is a reward, it'll take months to process. We don't have months. Then we find another way. We sell assets. We take on extra work. We accept reality," Ethan interrupted gently. "Clara, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But some fights you can't win. My father spent 30 years building that ranch, and I've spent 2 years watching it die. Maybe it's time to let go." Clara looked at him like he'd slapped her. "Let go? After everything we just fought for? After Tommy took a bullet and Jack risked his life and I nearly got dragged back to Chicago? You're just going to give up?" "I'm being realistic." "No, you're being a coward." Her voice shook with anger. "You stood up to Crow. You turned down $20,000. You fought armed men to protect me. But now that it's about fighting for yourself, for this ranch, you're ready to surrender?" "It's not the same." "It's exactly the same." "You told me that hope is what you do when you've given up, and planning is what you do when you still believe you can win. So which is it, Ethan? Are you giving up, or are you planning to win?" The words hung in the air between them. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to explain that this was different, that some battles couldn't be won. But looking at Clara's fierce eyes, he remembered the woman who'd walked into his filthy kitchen and refused to accept failure. "What do you suggest?" he asked finally. Clara's expression softened. "I suggest we go back to the ranch, assess the real damage, and figure out what we can salvage. Then we make a plan, a real plan, together." They rode back to Silver Ridge as the sun climbed higher, and what Ethan saw made his chest tight. The crew had been working all night. The barn rubble had been cleared into organized piles. The horses that scattered had been found and corralled. Jack had even started boarding up the broken windows in the main house. "Boss," Jack called when he saw them. "You're back. How's Tommy?"
"He'll live. Doctor says he needs rest and probably won't be able to do heavy work for a few weeks."
"We can handle it. Actually," Jack hesitated, "we've been talking. The crew. We know things are bad. We know you probably can't pay us right now. But we're staying anyway, at least until the spring drive. We figure we owe you that much."
Ethan didn't trust himself to speak, just nodded. Clara stepped forward.
"Then let's make it count. Everyone gather up. We need to take inventory and make decisions."
For the next hour, they went through everything. The barn was a complete loss, but they could manage without it until they had money to rebuild. The house was damaged, but livable. They'd lost 3 horses permanently, but the rest were accounted for. Most of the food supplies had survived, since the cookhouse had been spared. "The real problem is money," Jack said bluntly. "Even if we all work for free, there are supplies we need. Ammunition, medical supplies for Tommy, basic repairs. That costs cash we don't have." "What about the cattle?" Pete asked. "The spring drive is 6 weeks away. If we can get them to market—" "6 weeks is too long," Ethan said. "The bank wants payment in 30 days. Clara had been quiet, scribbling numbers on a piece of paper. Now she looked up. "What if we move up the drive?" Everyone stared at her. "That's impossible," Jack said. "The cattle aren't ready. The routes aren't clear yet. The buyers won't be in position for another month, at least." "What if we don't use the traditional routes? What if we drive the cattle directly to the railhead at Billings, instead of waiting for the market buyers to come to us?" "That's 300 miles through rough country," Ethan said. "It would take at least 3 weeks, maybe 4. We'd lose cattle, maybe lose men."
But if it works, you get paid immediately instead of waiting for the market cycle. How much would the cattle bring in Billings?
Ethan calculated quickly. "If we don't lose too many on the drive, maybe $4,000. Enough to pay off the loan and have something left over." "Then that's our plan." "Clara, it's too dangerous. Early spring drives are risky. Weather can turn on you. Rivers are running high. There are still hostile territories between here and Billings. And staying here means losing the ranch for certain. At least the drive gives us a chance." Clara met his eyes. "You asked me once if I was planning to win or just hoping. I'm planning. Are you with me?" Ethan looked around at his crew. These men who'd fought for him, who'd stayed when they had every reason to leave, who were willing to risk their lives on a desperate cattle drive because it was the only option left. "All right," he said finally. "We do the drive, but we do it smart. We'll need to plan every mile, prepare for every possibility. Jack, you've done early drives before. What do we need?" For the next week, the ranch became a whirlwind of preparation. They gathered the cattle, 200 head, most of them half wild and ornery from a hard winter. They repaired saddles and tack. They stocked up on basic supplies using the last of Ethan's credit. Clara worked from before dawn until after dark, preparing food that would last on the trail and wouldn't spoil. Tommy recovered enough to insist on coming along, despite Dr. Martinez's protests. "I'm not staying behind," he said stubbornly. "I took a bullet for this ranch. I'm seeing it through." "You're 15 years old with one working arm," Ethan argued. "And you need every hand you can get. I can ride. I can rope with one arm if I have to. Please, boss, don't leave me behind." Ethan looked to Clara for support, but she just smiled. "He's part of the crew, Ethan. His choice." 3 days before they were set to leave, Elizabeth returned to the ranch with news. The federal government was offering a reward for information that led to Crow's conviction, $10,000. But it wouldn't be paid out until after the trial, which could take months. "I'm sorry," Elizabeth said. "I tried to expedite it, but bureaucracy moves slowly. However," she handed Clara an envelope. "This is from the girls you saved, the ones who were freed from Crow's trafficking operation. They pooled together what little money they had. It's not much, but they wanted you to have it." Clara opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was $300 and a letter. She read it silently, tears streaming down her face. "What does it say?" Ethan asked gently. "It says thank you. It says I gave them hope when they had none. It says—" Her voice broke. "It says they're praying for me." $300, Jack said quietly. "That's a start." "It's more than a start," Clara said, wiping her eyes. "It's a reminder of why we fight, not just for the ranch, for each other, for the people who need us."
The night before the cattle drive, Ethan found Clara in the cookhouse, packing the last of the supplies. She moved methodically, checking and rechecking her lists. "You don't have to come on the drive," Ethan said. "It's going to be hard. Dangerous. You could stay here. Keep the ranch running while we're gone." Clara turned to face him. "Are you trying to protect me or get rid of me?" "Protect you. Always protect you." "I don't need protection, Ethan. I need to be part of this. We're in this together, remember?" He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared we'll fail. Scared I'll lose you. Scared that even if we make it to Billings, it won't be enough. Fear is just love with nowhere to go," Clara said softly. "You're afraid because you care. That's not weakness. That's what makes you strong." "Where did you learn that?" "From a stubborn rancher who fought 6 armed men for a cook he'd known 3 weeks. She smiled up at him. "You taught me that caring is worth the risk. Now I'm teaching you the same lesson." They stood there in the quiet cookhouse, holding each other, while the rest of the ranch prepared for the hardest journey any of them had ever faced. Tomorrow, they would drive 200 cattle across 300 miles of dangerous territory, with almost no supplies, a skeleton crew, and a 15-year-old kid with a bullet wound that was barely healed. It was insane. It was desperate. It was their only chance. "Promise me something," Ethan said. "What?" "Promise me that no matter what happens on this drive, you'll remember that you're the reason this ranch is still standing. Not me. You." Clara pulled back to look at him. "That's not true." "It is. I was ready to give up before you arrived, ready to let it all fall apart. You showed me how to hope again, how to plan, how to believe that people could be worth trusting." He touched her face gently. "Win or lose, you saved me, Clara Bennett. I need you to know that." "Ethan." "I love you," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I know it's too soon. I know we're in the middle of chaos and this isn't the right time. But if something happens on this drive, if we don't make it, I need you to know that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You stubborn, impossible, wonderful man. I love you too. I've loved you since the day you turned down $20,000 and chose to fight for someone you barely knew. I've loved you every day since, watching you become the man your father raised you to be, while also becoming someone better. Someone who knows how to trust." They kissed then, not desperately like after the battle, but deeply, slowly, like two people who'd found home in each other. When they finally broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to make it," Clara whispered. "We're going to save this ranch and build something beautiful here. Together." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I have faith. In you. In us. In the fact that we've already survived the worst and we're still standing," she smiled. "And because I'm stubborn enough to refuse any other ending." Ethan laughed despite everything. "That's what I love about you." "Just one thing among many, I hope." "Among many," he agreed. At dawn the next morning, the crew mounted up. 8 cowboys, 1 determined cook, and 200 head of half-wild Montana cattle. They had 3 weeks to cover 300 miles, navigate dangerous terrain, avoid hostile forces, and get to Billings before the bank took everything. The odds were terrible. The risks were enormous. But as Ethan looked at Clara riding beside him, fierce and fearless and completely committed to this insane plan, he realized something his father had never understood. The best things in life were always worth risking everything for. They drove the first cattle out of the ranch gates as the sun rose over Montana, and behind them,
Silver Ridge Ranch sat silent and damaged, but not defeated. Not yet. Not ever. The first day on the trail, they lost 12 head of cattle. The animals were still half wild from winter, spooked by everything, and no amount of skilled herding could keep them all together when one stubborn steer decided to bolt for freedom. By nightfall, Ethan's crew was exhausted, frustrated, and starting to wonder if this whole plan was suicide. 12 cattle is 12% of our profit, Jack said grimly as they made camp. We can't afford to lose that many every day. We won't, Clara said, stirring a pot of beans over the fire. Tomorrow we'll do better.
The cattle will settle. We'll find our rhythm. And if we don't, then we adapt. That's what we do. She looked at Ethan. Right? Ethan wanted to share her confidence, but the weight of responsibility was crushing. 12 cattle gone on day 1. At this rate, they'd arrive in Billings with nothing. Get some rest, he told the crew. We start at first light. But rest didn't come easy. Tommy was in pain, trying to hide it, but failing. His shoulder throbbed with every movement, and the jostle of riding all day had reopened part of his wound. Clara rebandaged it by firelight, her face tight with worry. You should turn back, she told him quietly. Ride to town. Let Dr. Martinez take care of this properly. No way, Tommy said through gritted teeth. I'm not quitting. It's not quitting. It's being smart. It's the same thing. The kid's voice cracked slightly. You all risked your lives for me. I'm not abandoning you now. Clara looked to Ethan for backup, but he just shook his head. He understood what Tommy felt. Pride was sometimes all a man had left. The second day was worse. A spring storm rolled in from nowhere, freezing rain that turned the ground to mud and made the cattle even more skittish. They lost 8 more head when lightning spooked the herd and sent them scattering. It took 3 hours to round them back up, and by then everyone was soaked, freezing, and angry. This is insane, Pete muttered. We're going to kill ourselves out here. Then go back, Ethan snapped. Nobody's forcing you to stay. Boss, I didn't mean... Yes, you did, and you're right. This is insane. But it's also our only option, so either commit to it or ride out. I'm done arguing. Pete looked stung, but didn't leave. None of them did, though Ethan could see the doubt growing in their eyes. That night, Clara found him standing watch over the herd, staring into the darkness. You're pushing them too hard, she said softly. I'm pushing everyone too hard, including you. I can handle it. Can you? Clara, you're cooking for 8 people over an open fire in freezing rain. You're tending Tommy's wound. You're keeping track of supplies, and you're trying to keep my spirits up when you should be focused on your own survival. Is that what you think I'm doing? Trying to keep your spirits up? Aren't you? Clara stepped closer. I'm fighting for our future, Ethan. Not just yours. Ours. Every mile we cover is 1 mile closer to saving the ranch, to building something real together. That's not charity. That's investment. What if we fail? What if we lose the whole herd and arrive in Billings with nothing? Then we'll figure something else out. But we don't fail by trying. We only fail by giving up. Ethan pulled her close, needing her warmth, her certainty. I don't deserve you. Good thing I'm not asking for what you deserve. I'm choosing what I want. She kissed him quickly. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder. She was right. Day 3 brought the river crossing. The Yellowstone was running high and fast from snowmelt, and there was no way around it. They had to get 200 cattle across 100 yards of churning water, or lose days going upstream to find a better crossing. We should wait, Jack said, studying the current. Let the water settle. We don't have time to wait, Ethan replied. We're already behind schedule. Boss, this is dangerous.
One wrong move and we lose cattle. Maybe lose men. I know the risks. We're crossing today. They spent an hour preparing, tying gear tight, planning the safest route, organizing who would lead and who would guard the flanks. Then Ethan rode his horse into the water first, showing the cattle it could be done. The cold hit him like a hammer. The current was stronger than he'd anticipated, pulling at his horse, threatening to sweep them downstream. But he kept going, kept fighting, and finally reached the other side. "See?" he shouted back. "It's manageable." Then they started driving the cattle across. For the first 50 head, everything went smoothly. The animals followed the leaders, swam awkwardly but steadily, made it to the far bank. Ethan started to think maybe they'd get lucky. Then a steer panicked mid-river, thrashing wildly, and suddenly 20 cattle were fighting the current instead of swimming with it. Cowboys rode in to help, but the chaos spread faster than they could contain it. "Pull back!" Jack screamed. "Let them go!" But Tommy didn't pull back. He rode straight into the mess, trying to rope a drowning calf. His horse lost its footing. Suddenly both horse and rider were underwater, being swept downstream. Clara screamed Tommy's name and spurred her horse into the river without thinking. Ethan's heart stopped as he watched her fight the current, reach the kid, grab his collar just as he went under again. For one terrible moment, Ethan thought he was about to lose both of them. Then Jack was there, rope flying, catching Clara's saddle horn and hauling them toward shore. Other cowboys joined in, forming a human chain, pulling until all three, Clara, Tommy, and the horse, were on solid ground. Tommy coughed up water, gasping. His wounded shoulder was bleeding again, worse than before. Clara collapsed beside him, shaking from cold and adrenaline. "You stupid brave boy," she whispered. "You almost died." "But I didn't," Tommy managed. "And I saved the calf." Sure enough, the calf was struggling onto the shore nearby, alive because a 15-year-old kid was too stubborn to let it drown. They lost 32 head in that crossing, nearly a fifth of the herd, gone in minutes. The remaining cattle huddled on the far shore, traumatized and exhausted. "We're done," Pete said flatly. "We can't recover from this. Even if we make it to Billings, we won't have enough cattle left to pay off the loan." Ethan did the math in his head. Pete was right. They'd started with 200. Now they were down to 150. They needed at least 175 to make the minimum payment. "We keep going," he said. "Boss, be reasonable. I said we keep going." Ethan's voice was ice. "We're halfway there. Turning back now means losing everything for certain. At least if we keep pushing, there's still a chance." "A chance at what? Arriving broke and broken?" "A chance at not being the man who gave up when things got hard." Ethan looked each crew member in the eye. "My father built that ranch from nothing. He fought drought and debt and every kind of hardship Montana could throw at him. He never quit, not once. And I won't dishonor his memory by being the son who surrendered because the river was too deep." The crew exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they nodded. "All right, boss," Jack said quietly. "We're with you, all the way to Billings." That night, they camped on the far side of the Yellowstone. Tommy's fever spiked from infection in his wound. Clara worked frantically to bring it down, using every herb and remedy she knew. But by midnight, the kid was delirious. "I'm sorry, boss," Tommy mumbled in his fever dreams. "I tried to save them all. I tried so hard." "I know, son," Ethan said, wiping the kid's forehead with a cool cloth. "You did good. You did real good." "Don't let them take the ranch. Promise me, don't let them take it." "I promise." Clara pulled Ethan aside. "He needs real medicine, a real doctor. If this infection spreads..." "The nearest town is 40 miles north. We'd lose 2 days.
Ethan, he could die.
I know, Ethan's voice broke. I know, and I'm making the worst decision of my life by saying we can't stop.
Because if we lose those 2 days, we definitely lose the ranch. And then Tommy took a bullet for nothing. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I hate this. I hate that you're right.
So do I. They sat with Tommy through the night, taking turns keeping watch over both the sick kid and the restless herd. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Tommy's fever finally broke. He woke up weak but lucid, looking up at them with tired eyes.
Did we lose the herd?
He whispered. Not yet, Ethan said, but we're still fighting.
Good. That's good.
Tommy closed his eyes again.
Don't stop fighting, boss. Not ever.
By day 5, they'd fallen into a brutal rhythm. Wake before dawn, drive the cattle until they couldn't take another step, make camp, tend the wounded, sleep a few hours, repeat. The landscape was unforgiving. Rocky terrain that tore up the cattle's hooves, thorny brush that cut the horses, and always the knowledge that they were running out of time.
How many miles today? Clara asked on the 7th night.
18, Jack reported. We're averaging 16 miles a day. At this rate, we'll reach Billings in 13 days.
The bank payment is due in 12, Ethan said.
Then we need to push harder tomorrow. But the next day, they ran into a problem they hadn't anticipated. Another cattle drive was using the same trail, heading in the opposite direction. 200 head of cattle met 200 head going the other way, and chaos erupted. The other crew's foreman rode up, furious. You're supposed to yield to the northbound drive. That's trail law.
We can't afford to yield, Ethan said. We're on a deadline.
So are we. Get your cattle off the trail or we'll drive right through them.
Like hell you will.
The 2 men stared each other down while both herds milled nervously. This could turn violent fast. Cowboys on both sides had hands on their weapons.
Then Clara rode forward, positioning herself between the 2 foremen. Gentlemen, fighting won't move either herd faster. But what if we work together? Split the trail. Your cattle take the west side, ours take the east. We move slowly past each other, everyone keeps their livestock under control, and we both get where we're going without bloodshed.
The other foreman looked her up and down. Who are you?
Someone who's tired of men solving problems with fists when there are smarter solutions available.
Clara's voice was steel wrapped in politeness.
Do we have an agreement?
After a tense moment, the foreman nodded. Fine, but your people better control your herd.
Same to you.
It took 3 hours to get both herds past each other, but Clara's plan worked. They lost only 2 cattle in the confusion, a miracle considering how badly it could have gone. As the other drive disappeared over the horizon, Jack grinned at Clara.
Boss, when this is over, you need to make her your partner, officially.
Planning on it, Ethan said, not taking his eyes off Clara. By day 10, they were all running on fumes. The cattle were gaunt from the hard push. The horses were limping. Tommy's shoulder had healed enough that he could work, but he'd lost weight and color. Even Clara looked worn down, her hands raw from cooking and her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. But Billings was close now, just 3 more days. Then the final disaster struck. They woke on day 11 to find 20 cattle missing. Not scattered, stolen. The tracks were clear. A group of rustlers had cut them out during the night and driven them north while the exhausted crew slept through it.
How did we not hear them?
Pete demanded. Because we were dead tired, Jack said bitterly. They waited until we were too worn out to keep proper watch. Ethan stared at the tracks, doing the math. They now had 128 head.
They needed 175 to pay off the loan.
Even selling at premium prices, they'd come up almost $2,000 short.
"We go after them," he said. "Boss, they've got a 6-hour head start. By the time we catch up—" "We go after them," Ethan repeated. "I'm not letting thieves take what we've bled for."
"Ethan, be smart about this," Clara pleaded. "If we chase the rustlers, we might lose the whole herd. The cattle can't be left unguarded."
Then we split up. "Jack, you take 5 men and keep the main herd moving toward Billings. I'll take 2 men and go after the rustlers."
"That's suicide," Jack said flatly. "We don't know how many rustlers there are. Could be 3, could be 10.
"I don't care if it's 50. Those are my cattle, my ranch, my future." Ethan's voice was raw. "I'm getting them back."
Clara grabbed his arm. "Then I'm coming with you."
"No, absolutely not."
"You need someone watching your back, and I'm the best shot here after Jack."
"Don't argue with me, Ethan Cole. We're wasting time." There was no time to argue. Ethan chose Pete and one other cowboy to ride with him while Jack took the main herd onward. The plan was simple: catch the rustlers, recover the cattle, rejoin the main herd before they reached Billings. Simple. Impossible. Their only option. They rode hard through rough country, following tracks that the rustlers hadn't bothered to hide. These weren't professional thieves, probably just opportunists who saw a weak crew and took a chance. That was good and bad. Good because amateurs made mistakes. Bad because amateurs panicked easily and did stupid, violent things. 6 hours into the chase, they spotted the rustlers camped in a ravine, cooking breakfast like they hadn't just stolen a man's livelihood. 4 men, Pete counted, and they're armed. "So are we," Ethan said. "Boss, we should wait for dark, sneak in, get the cattle quiet-like." "We don't have time for dark. We're doing this now."
Clara touched his arm. "Ethan, rushing in angry is how people die. Pete's right. We wait. We plan. We win smart." Every instinct screamed at Ethan to charge in, to take back what was his through force and fury. But Clara's calm certainty cut through the rage. "Fine," he said. "We wait until dark, but the second the sun sets, we move." Those hours of waiting were torture. They watched the rustlers laugh and eat stolen beef, completely unconcerned about being caught. Ethan's hands clenched his rifle so hard his knuckles went white. "Why do people steal?" he asked Clara quietly. "Why take what someone else worked for?" "Because they're desperate, or lazy, or they never learned that easy money always costs someone else everything." Clara looked at him. "But we're not like them. We earn what we have. We fight for it. And that's why we'll win." When darkness finally fell, they moved. Silent as shadows, they circled the camp. The rustlers had posted 1 guard, but he was half asleep, making it easy for Pete to knock him out cold without a sound. Then Ethan stepped into the firelight, rifle raised. "Hands up! Nice and slow!" 3 men scrambled to their feet, reaching for weapons. Ethan fired a shot into the dirt at their feet. "Next one goes through flesh. Your choice." They froze. "Who are you?" one of them demanded. "The man whose cattle you stole, and I'm taking them back. We found these cattle wandering loose. Finders keepers." "Liar. You cut them out of my herd while we slept. That's theft. And in this territory, cattle rustling is a hanging offense." The lead rustler's face went pale. "Now wait a minute. We didn't know they belonged to anyone specific." "Shut up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away from this camp. Leave the cattle, leave your weapons, and count yourselves lucky I don't string you up right here." "You can't do that."
"We need those weapons to survive out here. Should have thought of that before you stole from desperate men." Ethan's voice was ice. "Walk. Now. Or I let my crew decide what happens to cattle thieves." They walked. Ethan and his group recovered all 20 cattle and drove them through the night to catch up with the main herd. By dawn, they'd reunited, and Jack actually smiled when he saw them. Thought you were dead, boss. Not yet. Ethan looked at the full herd. 148 head. Still not enough, but closer. How far to Billings? Half a day's drive. We'll be there by nightfall. They made it with 2 hours to spare before sunset. Billings rose out of the plains like a promise. Civilization, safety, the railhead that would determine their future. Ethan's hands shook as they drove the cattle into the holding pens near the station. A cattle buyer named Morrison approached, clipboard in hand. "You're early for the season." "Most drives don't arrive for another month." "We're not most drives," Ethan said. "How much are you paying per head?" Morrison inspected the cattle, noting their rough condition. They're trail-worn, underweight. "I can offer $18 per head." Ethan calculated quickly. 148 head at $18 each came to $2,664. Not enough. They needed $3,000 to pay off the loan and have anything left over. "They're worth $25 per head," Ethan countered. "Maybe in better condition, but these animals need fattening. 18 is my final offer." Clara stepped forward. "Mr. Morrison, these cattle were driven 300 miles through early spring conditions because we're desperate enough to take that risk. That kind of desperation makes for motivated sellers, yes, but it also makes for highly motivated animals. These cattle survived a river crossing that killed dozens of others, survived storms and rough terrain. That's not weakness. That's the toughest herd you'll see this year." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a sales pitch, ma'am." "It's not a pitch. It's truth. $23 per head. That's our counteroffer. 20. 22, and we walk away from this negotiation right now." Morrison studied her, then looked at the cattle, then back at her. Finally, he nodded. 21, final offer. Deal. 148 head at $21 each came to $3,108. Enough to pay off the loan with $108 left over. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. Ethan felt his knees go weak. Clara grabbed his arm, holding him steady, and when he looked at her face, he saw tears streaming down her cheeks. "We won," she whispered. "We beat them all. The bank, the Rustlers, the river, everything. We won." The crew erupted in celebration, whooping and hollering and slapping each other on the back. Tommy, brave, foolish Tommy who'd taken a bullet and nearly drowned, was crying openly. Jack was grinning so wide it looked painful. But Ethan could only stare at Clara. This woman who'd walked into his life a stranger and become his everything. Who'd fought beside him, believed in him, saved him in every way that mattered. "Marry me," he said. Clara blinked. "What?" "Marry me, right here in Billings, before we ride back to the ranch. I don't want to wait another day to make you my partner in everything." "Ethan Cole, that's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "It's the only one I've got." Clara laughed through her tears. "Then yes, yes, you stubborn, impossible, wonderful man. I'll marry you." And there in the dusty cattle pens of Billings, Montana, surrounded by exhausted cowboys and bawling cattle, Ethan kissed the woman who'd saved his life, his ranch, and his soul. Tomorrow they'd find a preacher. Tomorrow they'd send the bank payment by wire. Tomorrow they'd start the long ride home to rebuild what they'd nearly lost. But tonight they celebrated, because they'd earned it. They found a preacher the next morning in a small church on the edge of Billings. Reverend Thompson was an elderly man with kind eyes who didn't ask questions when Ethan and Clara showed up dusty from the trail, requesting an immediate ceremony. "You two look like you've been through a war," he observed. "Something like that," Ethan said. "Can you marry us today?" "I could, but marriage is a sacred covenant, son. not something to rush into because you're flush with cattle money and feeling grateful to be alive. Clara stepped forward. Reverend, I've known this man for 2 months. In that time, I've watched him risk everything to protect people he barely knew. I've seen him choose justice over profit, loyalty over safety, and love over pride.
I know more about his character in 2 months than most people learn about their spouses in 2 years. So yes, we're rushing, but we're not being rash. The Reverend studied her face, then Ethan's, then smiled. Well then, let's get you two married before you change your minds. The ceremony was simple. The crew stood as witnesses, still wearing trail-worn clothes, smelling of cattle and dust. Tommy held the rings they'd bought that morning with part of their remaining cash. Simple gold bands that cost more than they should have spent, but felt necessary anyway. When Reverend Thompson said, "You may kiss your bride," Ethan pulled Clara close and kissed her like they had all the time in the world, even though they didn't. "Mrs. Cole," he whispered against her lips. "Mr. Cole," she whispered back. Jack whooped. The rest of the crew joined in, and for one perfect moment, everything was right. Then they had to face reality. The telegraph office was their first stop after the ceremony. Ethan sent the wire to Blackwell's bank with shaking hands, transferring $3,000 to pay off the loan in full. The operator confirmed receipt and gave Ethan a stamped receipt as proof of payment. "That's it?" Ethan stared at the paper. $3,000? And it's just done? "That's how banking works, son. You owe money, you pay money. The debt disappears." The operator glanced at Clara. "Congratulations on the wedding, by the way. Your wife's got good negotiating skills. Heard about how she talked Morrison up on the cattle price." "She's got a lot of skills," Ethan said, squeezing Clara's hand. They walked out of the telegraph office and stood in the street, looking at each other like they couldn't quite believe what they'd accomplished. "We did it," Clara said. "We actually did it. We did more than that. We got married. Started a whole new life." Ethan pulled her close. "Mrs. Cole, what do you want to do with the rest of our first day as husband and wife?" "I want to go home. I want to see Silver Ridge and start rebuilding everything we left behind. It's a 3-week ride back. Then we better get started." But before they could leave Billings, they had one more piece of business. Jack approached Ethan that afternoon with a serious expression. "Boss, we need to talk about the crew." "What about them?" "Well, we just completed the hardest drive any of us have ever done. Lost cattle, nearly drowned, fought rustlers, pushed ourselves to the breaking point. The men are exhausted, and some of them are wondering if they want to go back to the ranch or take their pay and find easier work." Ethan's chest tightened. "They want to leave?" "They want to know what you're offering them if they stay. We came on this drive because we owed you, but that debt's paid now. If they're going to commit to rebuilding Silver Ridge, they need to know it's worth their time." It was a fair question. Ethan gathered the crew that evening and laid out the truth. "I can't pay you much right now. After the loan payment and buying supplies for the trip home, I've got about $60 left. That's not enough for proper wages. But here's what I can offer. A stake in the ranch. Not ownership, I'm not ready to give that up, but a profit-sharing agreement. When we sell cattle, you get a percentage. When the ranch grows, you grow with it. You'll be partners, not just hired hands." The men exchanged glances. Pete spoke first. "What percentage?" 5% each for the core crew. More if you stay 5 years or longer." "That's not much," one of the cowboys said. "No, it's not, but it's honest. And it's a chance to build something together, instead of just working for someone else's dream." Ethan looked at each man. "I'm not going to lie and say the ranch will make you rich, but I will promise that every person who stays will be treated like family, like someone who matters. That's worth something." Tommy stood up, his wounded shoulder still bandaged. "I'm staying. Don't even have to think about it." Jack nodded. "Me too. I'm too old to start over somewhere else anyway." One by one, the others committed. Not all of them. 2 cowboys decided to take their pay and move on, which was their right. But 6 men stayed. 6 men who'd fought beside Ethan and Clara and earned the right to help rebuild. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You won't regret this." "We better not," Pete said with a grin, "because we just turned down paying jobs to work for a man who has $60 to his name." $68, Clara corrected. "I've been saving my cooking wages." The men laughed, and the tension broke. They left Billings the next morning, riding light, without cattle to slow them down. The journey back should have been easier, but Ethan couldn't shake a growing sense of dread. What if they returned to find the ranch destroyed beyond repair? What if Blackwell had already started foreclosure proceedings before the wire arrived? What if everything they'd fought for was gone? "You're worrying again," Clara said, riding beside him. "How can you tell?" "Because you get this line right here." She reached over and touched the space between his eyebrows. "When you're thinking too hard about things you can't control." "I can't help it. We left the ranch damaged and undefended. Anything could have happened in 3 weeks. Or nothing happened. Or things got better. You don't know until we get there, so stop torturing yourself with possibilities." "Easy for you to say. You're naturally optimistic." Clara laughed. "Ethan, I spent 2 years running from a man who wanted me dead." "I'm not optimistic. I'm just practical. Worrying doesn't change outcomes. It just makes the journey harder." "How did you get so wise?" "I married a stubborn rancher who taught me that fighting for something is better than hiding from everything." They made good time without cattle, covering 25 miles a day. By the end of the first week, they'd crossed back over the Yellowstone, much calmer now, and were deep into Montana territory. The land looked different somehow. Greener, more alive. Or maybe Ethan was just seeing it through different eyes. On the 8th day, they encountered a problem. A group of settlers had built a cabin right across what used to be open rangeland, blocking the traditional trail. "You'll need to go around," the settler said when Ethan approached. "This is private property now. We filed a claim with the territorial office." "This was open range last month," Ethan said. "Not anymore. Things are changing. The territory's filling up. You cowboys are going to have to accept that." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to explain that blocking trails hurt everyone. But Clara touched his arm. "It's not worth fighting over. We'll go around." "But it's the principle." "The principle is that we have bigger things to worry about than one stubborn settler. Let it go." Ethan let it go, but the encounter bothered him. The West was changing. The open range he'd grown up with was disappearing. Soon there'd be fences and property lines, and people who'd never understand what it meant to fight for land instead of just filing paperwork for it. "You're quiet," Clara said that night as they made camp. "Just thinking about the future, about how different it's going to be." "Different doesn't mean worse." "Maybe not, but it means harder, more competition, more rules, more people who don't understand ranching telling ranchers how to do it." Clara poked the fire, sending sparks into the night sky. "Then we adapt. We figure out how to make Silver Ridge work in the new West, instead of clinging to the old one. That's what survivors do." "Is that what we are? Survivors?" "We're more than that. We're builders." She looked at him across the flames. "We survived Crow. We survived the cattle drive. We survived every impossible thing that should have broken us. Now we get to build something beautiful from all that pain." Ethan moved around the fire and pulled her close. I love you, Clara Cole.
I love you too. Now stop brooding and help me figure out what we're cooking for breakfast tomorrow. We're almost out of beans.
On the 15th day of the journey home, they crested a hill and saw Silver Ridge Ranch spread out below them. Ethan's breath caught. The barn was still destroyed, just a blackened foundation and charred timbers. But someone had cleared the debris and stacked the salvageable wood in neat piles. The main house had new boards over the broken windows. The corral had been repaired, and smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney. "Someone's been here," Jack said, hand moving to his rifle. They rode in cautiously, ready for anything. What they found was Elizabeth, Clara's journalist friend, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee. "Took you long enough," she called out. "I've been here 3 days waiting for you." Clara dismounted and ran to embrace her. "What are you doing here?" "Bringing good news and helping clean up this disaster of a ranch." Elizabeth handed Ethan an envelope. "This is from the federal government. Reward for your assistance in capturing Nathaniel Crow. It's not the full $10,000. That won't come until after the trial. But they authorized an advance payment for witnesses who cooperated." Ethan opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a bank draft for $2,000. $2,000, he whispered. That's enough to rebuild the barn, buy new equipment, stock up for winter."
"That's enough to give Silver Ridge a real second chance," Elizabeth corrected. "Which you both deserve." She smiled at Clara. "I also brought something else. Letters from the women you saved. They wanted you to know they're doing well. Some have found jobs. Others have reunited with their families. All of them are free because you were brave enough to speak up." Clara took the letters with tears streaming down her face. "I didn't save them. The marshals did. The marshals acted because you gave them the information they needed. You started it all, Clara. Own that." That night, the crew celebrated their return properly. Elizabeth had somehow procured a case of good whiskey and enough food to make a real feast. They ate and drank and told stories about the cattle drive until everyone was hoarse from laughing. "To Tommy," Jack said, raising his glass. "The kid who took a bullet and nearly drowned, but still saved a calf." "To Pete," Tommy countered, "who complained the whole drive, but never quit." "To Clara," Ethan said quietly, "who saved us all in more ways than I can count." Clara stood up, glass in hand. "No, to all of us. Because we did this together. Every impossible mile, every terrible decision, every moment we thought we'd fail, but kept going anyway. That's what families do. They fight for each other. And you're my family now." The men cheered. Even Elizabeth looked touched. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Ethan and Clara stood together on the porch, looking out at their battered but unbroken ranch. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now we rebuild. Slowly, carefully. We fix what's broken and make what's weak strong again." "I meant with us. What happens with our marriage? Our life together?" Ethan turned to face her. "I want to build something that lasts. Not just the ranch, but us. I want kids someday. I want to watch Tommy grow into a man and help Jack retire comfortably. I want to turn this place into something we're proud of." "That's a lot of wants." "It is, but for the first time in years, I actually believe they're possible." He took her hands. "Clara, I'm not going to be an easy man to be married to. I'm stubborn and proud, and I make terrible decisions when I'm scared." "I know. I've seen all of that already." "But I will fight for you every single day. I will choose you over pride, over fear, over every instinct my father taught me about never trusting people. You're my partner in everything now, and I take that seriously." Clara smiled. "Good, because I plan to hold you to that promise." They kissed under the Montana stars, two people who'd been broken by their pasts, but refused to let that brokenness define their future. The next morning,
they started rebuilding. The crew cleared the barn foundation completely, preparing for new construction. Ethan rode into town to order lumber and supplies, using part of the reward money.
Clara reorganized the cookhouse and started planning a garden 3 times the size of her first one.
At noon, a rider appeared carrying another telegram. Ethan's stomach dropped when he saw it was from Blackwell's bank. He opened it with shaking hands, expecting more threats, more demands. Instead, it was a simple receipt confirmation that the loan had been paid in full, and the lien on Silver Ridge Ranch was officially released. "It's over," he said, staring at the paper. "The bank debt is actually, officially, over." Clara read over his shoulder. "We're free. We're free." They celebrated quietly, just the two of them, sitting on the porch steps and letting the reality sink in. No more debt. No more Blackwell holding the ranch hostage. No more desperate measures and impossible deadlines. Just the hard, honest work of building a life together. Over the next few months, Silver Ridge transformed. The new barn rose from the ashes, bigger and stronger than the old one.
The house got proper repairs, including glass windows and a fixed door.
Clara's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables for the crew. Tommy learned to work around his scarred shoulder, becoming one of the best ropers on the ranch. Jack taught the newer cowboys everything he knew about ranching, establishing traditions that would outlast all of them. And Clara and Ethan built a marriage based on trust, honesty, and the knowledge that they'd survive the worst together and come out stronger. 6 months after the cattle drive, Elizabeth returned with final news. Crow had been convicted on all charges. The full reward would be paid out within the month. The girls he'd trafficked had testified bravely, seeing justice served at last. "It's really over," Clara said when Elizabeth left. "All of it. The running, the fear, the looking over my shoulder. How does it feel?" "Like I can finally breathe." She looked at Ethan.
"Like I can finally be just Clara Cole, rancher's wife, instead of Clara Bennett, woman in hiding."
"I like Clara Cole better anyway."
"Me too."
Winter came to Montana, harsh and beautiful. The crew settled in for the long, cold months, telling stories and planning for spring. And on Christmas morning, Clara told Ethan they were going to have a baby. He stared at her, speechless. "Say something," she prompted. "I don't know what to say. I'm terrified and excited and completely unprepared." Clara laughed. "Good. That means you'll try hard to figure it out, like everything else we've done." The baby, a girl they named Grace, arrived in late summer, healthy and loud and perfect. Tommy insisted on being her honorary big brother. Jack carved her a cradle from salvaged barn wood. The crew treated her like a princess who'd inherited a kingdom made of Montana dirt and cowboy loyalty.
And Ethan, holding his daughter for the first time, finally understood what his father had gotten wrong all those years. The land was important. The ranch mattered. But people, the right people, were what made any of it worth fighting for. Years later, when Grace was old enough to ask questions, she'd sit on the porch with her parents and listen to stories about the cattle drive that saved Silver Ridge, about the woman who came to cook and stayed to build a family, about the cowboy who learned to trust again. "And they lived happily ever after?" Grace would ask. "No," Clara would correct gently. "We lived fully ever after. Happy and sad and scared and brave and everything in between. Because that's what real life is." "But you stayed together?" "We stayed together," Ethan would confirm, "through everything. That's the most important part."
And it was true. Through drought and prosperity, through hardship and triumph, through every challenge Montana could throw at them, Ethan and Clara Cole built something that lasted. Not because it was easy, not because they were perfect, but because they chose each other every single day and fought for the life they'd built together. Silver Ridge Ranch grew into one of the most respected operations in Montana Territory. The crew who'd risked everything on that desperate cattle drive became the foundation of something bigger than any of them had imagined. And the love story that started with a burned barn and a woman with secrets became the kind of legend that cowboys told around fires for generations. Because in the end, the greatest things in life aren't built on certainty or safety or perfect circumstances. They're built on courage, commitment, and the willingness to fight for what matters most. Even when the odds say you'll fail, even when the wise choice is to walk away, even when trusting someone feels like the most dangerous thing you could possibly do. Ethan Cole learned that lesson from a woman who arrived with one suitcase and stayed to become his entire world. And together they proved that the best endings are just the beginning of something even better.